And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, very happy to welcome Michael Fanone. He served as a Metropolitan Police Officer for 20 years. He was one of the officers who responded on January 6th. He testified before Congress about it. And he's got a new best-selling New York Times bestseller out, Hold the Line, The Insurrection and One Cop's Battle for America's Soul. Michael, welcome to the show, my friend. Thanks for being on.
Thank you guys for having me on.
Sure. And we were talking a little before we started about, your background being half Italian, I'm half Italian. It's my bonding, but there used to be so many Italians doing everything. Now it's not like it used to be. It's kind of, I live in New York and I'm half Arab. I think I meet more Arabs, half Arabs now than I meet and people of Arab heritage than I meet Italian heritage. So, you served for 20 years on the police force, in Metropolitan Police Force. What drove you? What attracted you just to be a police officer?
I think like a lot of Americans, I was driven to service by the events of 9/11. At that time, I was working construction and I enjoyed my work. Although at that time I was about to have my oldest daughter, Caitlin, and I was looking for better health care, more stable work environment, although I don't know if law enforcement necessarily provided that. But that being said, it was 50% looking for a way to serve and 50% looking for a better way to provide for my family.
It's interesting when you say, like, you go through the benefits of it. I mean, the tangible benefits like health insurance. I would have thought you'd be a police officer like in the suburbs of New Jersey or of Maryland or Virginia, not the DC. I know you started with the Capitol Police, but the DC Metropolitan Police. And then you were an undercover police officer. And your nickname, you got to tell us, your nickname was Spider-Man. Why was your nickname Spider-Man?
I think part of it had to do with I have a spiderweb tattoo on my neck, but I also had a habit of, when I was working, even as a patrol officer, hiding in some unlikely places to try to catch drug dealers or other criminals. I hid inside sewers, and I hid inside of dumpsters. At one point, I actually hid in a tree and jumped out of the tree to catch somebody who had just sold crack cocaine. I was a little bit of I was a handful as a rookie cop.
I would imagine it a little untraditional, but I imagine effective, because who would have thought to look into a tree or look in the sewer for a cop? Like, you're looking around for cops and then someone's hand comes out of the sewer and grabs you. So I imagine that was very effective. However, it may ruffle feathers, but it seemed really effective. I mean, how alarming when you work it's alarming. How much do you feel like your life's on the line when you were a DC police officer doing undercover work the way you were doing it?
I enjoyed the work. So, the fear never played a factor at the outset or even during an operation. It was always afterwards when you had a close call that you sat back with your partner and drank that beer down as fast as you possibly could and thought about shit, that was really dumb what I did, and there was a really close call. But then you went back and did it again the next day.
I know what you're saying. Like, when you're going through something, you don't take a moment to go, wow, this is dangerous, or I could be killed. You're getting through whatever the experience is, and you come out afterwards, you're like, that wasn't good at all, and I don't want to ever do that again, except you go back and do it. I'm talking about Michael Fanone, a former police officer, served 20 years. You wrote in your book, like most cops, I voted for Trump with enthusiasm in 2016. Can you explain for us why you and other police officers were enthusiastic about Donald Trump in 2016? What did you see in him?
At that particular time, right, what I saw was one candidate and one party that espoused to be pro law enforcement and supportive of my profession, and another that I saw as being anti law enforcement. And I'll tell you that, my perception was skewed because I was viewing it through the prism of Fox News, which I watched religiously. I did not watch or source news from any other outlets. It was my comfort food. After 2015 and the police shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, law enforcement became scrutinized, and in some areas, I felt as though the scrutiny was deserved. But having a conversation about what we can do better as law enforcement in this country is very different from some of the rhetoric that I saw coming from politicians and community activists that I felt was, damaging to that conversation, and also degrading to police officers, who, for the most part, are some of the most selfless Americans, and they enjoy a thankless profession. And that rhetoric became weaponized in the really what was assassination style killings of police officers that we saw.
Mhm.
We saw it in Dallas, Texas. We saw it in Louisiana. We saw it in New York. And I attended those funerals, as did hundreds, if not thousands, of police officers from all across the country. And it had a rippling effect through our community, and really created what I believe was an us against them, that being police officers versus the community, and police officers as Republicans versus the Democratic Party.
It's interesting that's where it became. I don't know if it was more politicized before or more of a partisan type of support, but you talk about in your book, and I saw another interview, you brought out that same thing, those assassinations, and the police, they're not monolithic, but I got a sense like, as a whole, they're like, hey, Democrats are not for us. And some of their rhetoric may have resulted in these attacks on us, rightfully or wrongfully. That's what people felt. And Republicans are talking about, we're going to be there for you, which we'll get to in a second. Just the flip of that on January 6th, just off the charts, how it went from there. And it's also interesting you mentioned how police officers are selfless. Some people's only interaction with the police is in a negative way, especially a lot of people of color. And for me, I used to be a lawyer, and I served as a municipal prosecutor in South Hackensack, New Jersey for years. And the cops, I got to know them. They were nice enough guys. They were there. If the case was BS, they would tell me this is BS, and we would just drop it. There weren't games, but it's the big cases where there are some bad cops, and they define police, and that's the struggle for you as good police officers to fight back. And I said, as a minority, being half Arab and being Muslim, the same struggle we have. We don't want to be defined by the worst Muslims out there who are ISIS, Al-Qaeda guys. You're like, that's not us, but that gets the headlines. So I can only imagine the frustration of that, because what police officers in general are like. And the ones I dealt with were always conscientious, thoughtful people who were there to help the town, the city of South Hackensack, which was a small city.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that part of the problem is the fact that, we treat these issues, these incredibly complex, multifaceted issues like policing in America, and come at it from kind of a, black and white perspective, that it's, there's only two sides to this, and there's only two viewpoints. And in reality, these are very complicated issues, and there's a lot of things that go into why policing is set up the way that it is, what resources are available to police officers. And I'm talking about, monetary resources that lead to better training, better equipped officers. I worked in the training industry for a number of years, and we used to talk about how, officers, training breeds proficiency in your weapons and your tactics. And officers who are proficient are confident, and confident officers use less force. When you look at a lot of the more polarizing events involving police officers in America, a lot of people are very quick to rush to judgment and say, "Oh, it's racism."
Mm-hmm.
Well, listen, policing and police officers are a microcosm of society. So there are going to be racist police officers, absolutely, just like there's racist doctors and racist lawyers and anything else. That being said, I don't think that that's the vast majority of motivation behind those incidents. I think that what you're looking at a lot of times is poorly trained officers who act out of fear in situations where they're called upon, to make very complicated decisions in a stressful environment. And I can tell you, as an officer for 20 years, I was never trained appropriately to deal with those situations. What I had the benefit of was good mentors.
Mhm.
I saw training outside of my department at my own dime. And I also had the benefit of a lot of on-the-job training. I mean, I was in proactive units my entire career, and I dealt with and interacted with violent criminals on an hourly basis. And so that, and, just being lucky, I never fell into some of the pitfalls or experienced some of the things that these officers did, at least not to the level where it cost somebody their life. I certainly made mistakes. I talk about it a lot in my book. I want people to have the opportunity to learn from those mistakes, especially younger officers today.
And I think the line you said about better trained officers use less force is really very telling. It's very instructive for people out there to hear about that, because it makes sense. And we get to January 6th, and you talk about in your book, and I'm chatting with Michael Fanone about his book, Hold the Line, The Insurrection and One Cop's Battle for America's Soul, that in this moment of being overwhelmed, officers fall back on their training. It's almost like their instincts, but their instincts are their training, you hope. And that's what to deal with. So let's go to the big day. It's January 6th, and you write about it in your book. It really, you take people there in a really good way. It's very, you can see it in your mind. It's like almost like a screenplay. That's the way I should put it. That you can see the images. That's January 6th, 1 p.m. You talk about be advised. You have a group of 50 charging up the hill on the left, and you hear that. And share with us when you heard a group of 50 charging in a way that sounded like organized charging. What did that indicate to you, and what was your takeaway there?
Well, first of all, I mean, I can tell you that the way an officer experienced January 6th, many Americans have watched the videos, the body-worn camera footage, the CCTV footage from that day. But when I'm walking through this, I mean, not only because I was actually there, but I know these people on the radio. That makes this experience like uniquely personal to me. Like, it wasn't just a metropolitan police officer or a law enforcement officer that was calling for assistance or declaring that officers were under attack and that they were making a tactical retreat back into the building. That was Robert Glover, the commander of our Special Operations Division, who was, on the West Terrace watching all of this unfold. I know Robert Glover. I've known him throughout my entire career. And hearing him say that, I mean, this is a person who is stone-faced in the, in very dangerous situations. And he is unemotional. And to hear his voice crack and to hear him, the stress and distress in his voice, that was incredibly alarming to me. And that was, a big part of my decision to, drop what I was doing at the police department at the time, put on a uniform, which I hadn't done in more than a decade, and along with my partner, Jimmy Albright, respond to the Capitol.
Yeah, I mean, you quote in your book about when Glover says he gives a 1033 distress call, not on behalf of one or two officers, but on behalf of the entire unit. And it's something in your 20 years that you had never heard before. And that was jarring to read that. And again, the way you write it, I can picture you going to your locker, taking your uniform out of the plastic because you only wear it for picture day, and going there. When you approached the scene and you saw this massive humanity on the Capitol Hill, what was your just reaction to that?
Well, so when I first arrived at the Capitol building, and I made my way up from the south side of the Capitol, Independence Avenue side, and your view of the West Terrace is completely obscured. So I couldn't see that there was 15,000 people amassed on the west front of the Capitol. All I could see was the individuals that were on the south side, and for the most part, they were rowdy, they were yelling, they were screaming, they were calling me and my partner names and yelling at the other officers. But I didn't see any violence there. I just saw a bunch of assholes.
Right.
And so, Jimmy and I make our way up into the Capitol building, and that was the first time that we saw any evidence of violence. In that the floors, there was blood splatter, on the walkway leading up to the South Capitol entrance, and then on the floors inside the Capitol itself. If you've watched my body-worn camera footage, you see Jimmy and I walk through the Hall of Columns, make our way to the crypt area, which is the circular area beneath the rotunda in the center of the Capitol. And it was at that point that I heard a distress call come out from another familiar voice, which was Commander Ray Mikhail. He was the commander of our Investigative Services Bureau at the time, which is essentially the commander of detectives. And he and I had worked together as partners at U.S. Capitol Police 20 some years earlier, and we both joined the Metropolitan Police Department around the same time. He self-deployed as a commanding officer and found himself in charge of about 40 police officers guarding a tunnel on the lower west terrace of the Capitol. Many people have seen images of it, videos from that. It turned out to be the pinnacle of the violence that day, the most significant point, in that you had these 15,000 rioters who were trying to gain entry into the Capitol through this, very small tunnel entrance, and it became a choke point of violence. When Jimmy and I made our way down into the tunnel, we saw these officers. We saw the smoke-filled tunnel with residual CS gas, pepper spray, bear spray, but we couldn't see the rioters. It wasn't until we made our way to the front of that line of officers that we really got a full understanding of what we were up against. These people were dressed in, military style clothing. They had military style equipment, bump helmets, Kevlar vests. Many of them were armed with, aluminum baseball bats, metal poles. They also had removed pieces of scaffolding and were using bicycle racks as battering rams to try to break the line of officers. And they were also using commercial grade fireworks, which you can imagine what the percussion sound is like when somebody throws a mortar into an enclosed space like a concrete tunnel. It was deafening. It was not like anything that I had ever experienced in my 20 years of policing. And it was brutal and violent. And, I think people that haven't taken the time to watch the images don't understand that you could not slide a credit card between two people in that tunnel. That's how dense, it was difficult to, cock my arm back just to throw a punch. If I did that, I was going to elbow a cop in the face. It was absolute total chaos.
I've seen so much of the footage of there, and I think people who listen to our show do. I don't know if the people who watch Fox News religiously like you once did. I'm sure they saw some of the images, but maybe not the details of it. But, you went through some of the weapons that you were confronted with. What's your reaction when you hear some members of Congress, Republicans, saying they were unarmed? I don't even mean the tourist thing, but just repeatedly saying it was not really an insurrection. They were unarmed.
Yeah. Listen, Ron Johnson's an idiot. Not just because of the comments that he made, but he has a history of being an idiot. Ron Johnson is lying when he characterizes January 6th as not being an insurrection because there weren't firearms present. On two fronts. First, there were firearms present. There were a lot of firearms present. There were arrests made and individuals, who were in possession of handguns and also semi-automatic rifles, both at the Stop the Steal rally outside of the White House, and then on the grounds leading up to the Capitol, the mall, etc. There were individuals that were in the crowd on January 6th at the Capitol that were arrested for possessing firearms, and there were firearms that were recovered. That being said, there was 15,000 of them. There were a few hundred officers. The idea that we would somehow be able to stop, frisk 15,000 people as they assaulted the Capitol is idiotic. And so we'll never know how many weapons were actually there. And that's just firearms.
Right.
It's a fact that these individuals came armed with other implements like baseball bats, batons, chemical sprays, and knives fastened to flag poles to be used as spears. They had everything there.
They were ready. I mean, I'm chatting with Michael Fanone about his experience on January 6th in his new book, Hold the Line. So, you detail in the book, and you've talked about it, that so you get sort of pivot to the front of the line there, and you're holding the line. The book is about a command given to you guys: hold the line, don't give up that door. And then you feel electric shock in the back of your neck. Tell us a little bit about what happened to you then.
Yeah, so at one point in the tunnel, myself and the other officers were able to repel the group that was, trying to push their way inside. And as we moved forward to the threshold of the tunnel, there was an individual who was identified. His name is Albuquerque Cosper Head from Tennessee. And he grabbed a hold of me at one point, grabbed me around my neck, pulled me off the police line out into the crowd. He's the one, if you recall, he yelled out, "I've got one." Mm-hmm. And at that point, I got one of the most savage beatings of my life. I was beaten from every direction from, many different individuals. And Mr. Head did plead guilty. He was sentenced to, I believe, 7.5 years in prison. And I also was assaulted by another individual, Kyle Young. He tried to remove my firearm from its holster. If you've watched my body-worn camera footage, he's one of the guys that's lunging towards me while I'm out in the crowd. He also pled guilty and was sentenced to, I believe, 8 years in prison. There was another individual, Thomas Sibick, who stole my police radio and ripped my badge off of my vest. He later buried the badge in the backyard of his home and then turned it over to law enforcement. He's still pending trial. And finally, Daniel Rodriguez is the guy that tased me on the back of my neck multiple times. And it's what doctors have attributed to the cause of my heart attack. And he is also pending trial.
What was it like in that, we mentioned earlier in the interview that yourself and others supported Donald Trump in 2016, and to see these same fellow Trump supporters, some of them carrying flags that show their support for the police, literally beating you and other officers at this very time in the name of Donald Trump, while in their mind probably still believing they're somehow pro-police?
I could speak to my experience and some of my friends that, that I still keep in contact with. Like, most of us were sick and tired of Donald Trump by the time the 2020 election came around. Mm-hmm. I was not prepared to support him, nor did I in the most recent presidential election. That being said, like, politics never entered my mind on January 6th. It wasn't until much, much later, around the same time that, the Republican Party as a whole started embracing, some of these mischaracterizations of the day, referring to it as a Taurus Day, saying that it wasn't an insurrection because there were no weapons present, and all the different lies. And then I think what really struck me and was eye-opening for me and important to see, not just for myself, but for a lot of other police officers that knew me, was what happened after I testified before Congress.
Mm-hmm.
To see some of the Fox News pundits attack me and attack my testimony, not attack any of the facts, because it's a fact-based account that's supported by video evidence, and also countless other law enforcement officers' testimony, and even the testimony of many of the individuals who assaulted me. So it all happened. But at that point, they felt the need to try to discredit me through other ways. And for those officers who know me, to hear me be, called like a sleeper agent for the Democratic Party, Nancy Pelosi's pawn, things like that, I think was eye-opening in the fact that certain news organizations are nothing more than propaganda. And, it may not have cost them a lot of viewers, but it sure as hell cost them a couple cops in Washington, D.C.
That's well put. And the only reason they smear you is because you were effective, that people watched your testimony and they were moved by it. So they had to come after you. When
Laura Ingraham awarded me an Oscar for best something, it was like action movie portrayal or some shit, which, by the way, Laura, I still haven't gotten my goddamn Oscar. But I saw it the same way that I did when I would testify in trial, and defense attorneys would resort to this theatrical performance and these theatrical tactics, and it always made me chuckle inside, because that's what happens when you have no facts to support your argument, and the only thing that you can do is talk about my physical appearance or say that I have a fake accent, bullshit like that. And so, it didn't even faze me. I thought it was pathetic.
And last couple of things, I'm chatting with Michael Fanone. So in your book, you tie a straight line between the insurrection and Donald Trump, which I do every single day on my Twitter feed. But what is your reaction to Donald Trump not being charged and now announcing a third run for president of the United States of America?
Well, I'm not going to say that I'm still holding out hope, but I still expect the Department of Justice to do its job. If you would ask me on January 7th, I would have told you unequivocally Donald Trump and his allies were morally and ethically responsible for what happened on January 6th. At the end of the Select Committee's investigation into the January 6th insurrection, I believe that there is clear and convincing evidence that ties Donald Trump and his allies to this scheme, which he orchestrated to defraud the American people. It was clear to me that before the first vote was ever cast, his plan was to deny the outcome of the election. His allies, Roger Stone, also coordinated with some of these anti-government extremist groups, the Oath Keepers, the 3 Percenters, and the Proud Boys, and that their intention that day was to disrupt the counting of the electoral votes, disrupt the certification of the election through violence, and that violence was the plan long before January 6th came about. And so, that being said, that there is this clear and convincing evidence, Donald Trump should be indicted and he should be tried. And it's our responsibility as Americans to accept the outcome of that trial.
If you were still a full-time police officer, would you have liked the opportunity to actually arrest Donald Trump for those charges?
Oh, I'd love it. I hope he resists.
That's funny. The last thing, we've heard in your book, you talked about Republicans, 21 House Republicans voted against giving yourself and other officers who risked their lives on January 6th to protect our democracy, the Congressional Gold Medal. You even noted Andrew Clyde, a Republican, refused to even shake your hand. Since the printing of that book, has that ever changed at all? Have these Republicans ever at least shook your hand and thanked you for your service and the other officers' service?
No, but I don't expect them to. What I expect them to do is to do the right thing and support an effort to acknowledge the police officers that fought at the Capitol on January 6th to protect their lives. I wouldn't shake Andrew Clyde's hand if it was the last fucking hand on earth. That guy disgusts me. But what he should do is do the right thing. And those officers that are still, upholding their oath and fulfilling their obligation to our Constitution, the officers that are still out there every single day on the street protecting them, do something to acknowledge them.
I agree. Very last thing, how are you doing? I know the last part of your book is about recovery. It's a long process, physical, emotional toll of this January 6th attack. How are you doing?
I mean, I'm getting by. I was fortunate. I made a full recovery from my physical injuries. And I do believe that I've come to terms with my service on January 6th, and I'm incredibly proud of that. I mean, what I continue to battle with, I think, is the same thing that many Americans battle with, and that's the fact that, so many people are rejecting, people in our country, our fellow countrymen, are rejecting facts. They're rejecting the truth, whether it's about, January 6th or whether it's about Donald Trump, his allies, their intentions. We still have not gotten past this idea that there are two realities. And that, that's going to be, take more effort.
Yeah. But I'm hopeful the election results has some impact on that. But Michael, it was great meeting you. Thank you for your service. And the book, again, is a great book. Hold the Line, Insurrection and One Cop's Battle for America. So it should be a movie or a mini series. Not kidding. You could play yourself. You're very good. But Michael, I wish you the best. It was great meeting you, my friend. And thanks for your service and your patriotism.
Likewise. I appreciate you guys having me on again. Thank you.
Of course. Take care.